Welcome to the DEFCON Warning System Digest. I'm Tom Lonelywolf, the director of the DEFCON Warning System. I actually second-guessed myself whether or not I do this particular DEFCON Digest. What we were planning to do was talk about the article we wrote a couple weeks ago titled, "Could the Hamas-Israel War Go Nuclear?" And the way things are going in that war is Israel is pretty much stomping over Hamas. They've got control of pretty much they've got control of Gaza. They've got control right now of the hospital where Hamas has a base underneath because Hamas use civilians for shields and stuff like that. But so Israel's pretty much got the upper hand on this war. But rockets are still being fired into Israel. The war is still going on. They still got a long fight ahead of them to be able to control Gaza. I'm tempted to insert my own politics into this, but I am not going to. I'm going to be a good boy. But things are going in the direction that it's looking less and less likely that nuclear weapons are going to be used in the war. But I second-guessed myself on that, and the points that the article makes are still valid, and the specter of nuclear use in this war has not gone away because the players in there still have motivation to use them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over this article, we're going to update it with some new information, and we're going to look a little bit more closely at the players and ask ourselves, could nuclear weapons still be used in this war? And as much as it's looking like, I'll give you the answer right now, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But while it's looking less and less likely that nuclear weapons are going to be used, yes, they still can. And here is why. So let's get into the article. So as tensions in the Middle East have now spilled over yet again into actual war, the question on everyone's mind is, could this war between Hamas and Israel turn nuclear? And the answer is more nuanced than the headlines and talking head would make it seem. On the one hand, we have a group of people who do not care about civilian casualties. Hamas's opening attack was designed against civilian rather than military targets, as Hamas attacked civilian structures and kidnapped at least 130 people, holding some hostage and executing others. Further attacks came against Israel's cities rather than military sites, as Hamas sought to inflict unacceptable carnage on Israel. Rockets were fired from civilian areas as Hamas used civilians as shields, and still do, hoping Israel would not retaliate if innocents were in the way. You look at most of the targets that Hamas is targeting. They're all civilian. Now, some of this is because the rockets they're firing are undependable. They aren't aimed very well. In fact, they actually blew up one of their own hospitals. Well, they didn't actually hit the hospital. They hit the lot beside the hospital. But the Hamas propaganda immediately went out there and said Israel destroyed a hospital. Not only did Israel not destroy a hospital, the bomb went off in a lot next to the hospital, and it wasn't an Israel missile. It was a Hamas missile that detonated early. And well, I think it detonated early, went off course. It was one of those two things. So these missiles are made in basements and stuff like that. So they're not the most accurate, reliable weapons. So we have an enemy who does not care about civilian casualties. So the question to be asked is, would it really be such a stretch for Hamas to resort to a nuclear weapon if it had one to use against Israel? And so that's a question in itself. Do they have a nuclear weapon? And if they had one, why haven't they used it already? Now, on the other side, Israel is a nuclear-armed nation fighting for its existence against an enemy that attacks with impunity. Oh, God. Is surrounded by people who want to see Israel destroyed and faces at least one enemy, Iran, who has a stated policy to destroy Israel and is actively pursuing nuclear weapons, notwithstanding any claims made by Iran and others to the contrary. Let me make this perfectly clear. Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapons program. They want nuclear weapons. These claims by Iran that nuclear weapons are against the Quran, or claims that they aren't, that the nuclear program is for peaceful medical and research purposes, they are lying to you. It is acceptable to the Muslim religion to lie to an infidel, to lie to an enemy. Therefore, it is acceptable for Iran to tell the West that they are not pursuing nuclear weapons, and that would be an acceptable lie because they are lying to an enemy. Iran, we have found nuclear particles and nuclear substances in Iranian laboratories that are far beyond what medical research would need. I think, this is just off the top of my head, I'm not going to go look this up because I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to waste your time and stuff like that. I don't want to waste my time looking this up as well. I think it went as high as 86%, and 90% is weapons grade. Now the 86%, it was just a few particles, but just the fact that they were there means that they brought this stuff up to 86%. And the general consensus is that anything above 60% is just, it takes a lot to go from 20% to 60%, but it takes very little to go from 60% to 90%, which is weapons grade. Now Iran would still need delivery vehicle and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they can't, build suitcase nukes. And when I say suitcase nukes, what I mean is not miniaturized weapons, but where they could just put it in a van or whatever and just drive it to where they need to. There are ways into Israel where they can bring a nuclear weapon in. They're just certainly not going to drive through a checkpoint. As hard as Israel tries to control its border, there are ways in. It can be done. Whether driving in or going through a plane, Israel is very secure, but nothing is 100% secure. They say that, when it comes to terrorism, the good guys have to be right 100% of the time. The bad guy only has to be right once. So that is Iran's threat. Just because they can't deliver a nuclear weapon on a missile doesn't mean they can't deliver a nuclear weapon, and they don't have to deliver it themselves. They can give it to Hamas or Hezbollah or a third party and bring it into Israel. So Iran's nuclear program is indeed very dangerous, because remember, Saudi Arabia said that if Iran gets a weapon, Saudi Arabia is going to want a nuclear weapon as well, and it's just going to explode from there. Remember, Iran is hated in the Middle East. They have no friends. They've got Syria and they got Russia, but in the Middle East, that's kind of it. There's a couple other small players in there, but generally speaking, Iran is really not liked in the Middle East. So Iran has a pretty good reason for having nuclear weapons just beyond Israel. They're going to want to protect themselves from Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Libya and Iraq and things like that. So Iran, I've gone all the way around. I'll come right back to where I began so we can keep moving. Iran is working on a nuclear weapons program. Don't believe me? Fine, don't. I'm telling you they are. So going back to the question of Israel and everything that's going on with them, with so many enemies around them who have dedicated themselves to Israel's destruction, would Israel really hold back nuclear use if the alternative was its destruction? Looking only at that last question, we have to acknowledge that nuclear war is certainly a possibility. Would Israel really hold back nuclear use if the alternative was its destruction? Looking only at that question, we have to acknowledge that nuclear war is certainly a possibility. During the Yom Kippur War, Israel came very close to using its nuclear weapons until a reversal of fortune in the war saw the enemy unexpectedly routed. Israel was very close. We all know, or anyone who follows this kind of stuff, Israel has a plan. All know about Israel's plan called the Samson option. And for those who don't know who Samson is, shame on you. But Samson was a judge of Israel who was captured by the Philistines, and he was placed between two pillars in a building, and he was blinded and everything like this. And he had strength from God, but his strength was in his hair, and when his hair was cut, he lost his strength. So his lover, Delilah, tricked him into getting his hair cut. So I won't go into the whole story, but he was captured and he was placed between these two pillars. And during the time of his capture, his hair grew back and he got his strength back. So what he did is, he during a large gathering, he used his strength to push the pillars apart, cause the building to collapse. And in it, he died, but he also killed a bunch of Philistines. So this is why it's called the Samson option. If Israel is going to be destroyed, they're going to take out their enemy with them. So this is what was happening in the Yom Kippur War. Israel was about to be destroyed, and so they figured they were going to launch their nuclear weapons and take the enemy with them. So this shows that Israel is very restrained in the use of their nuclear arsenal. But it also shows that they are willing to use it. Now, of course, Hamas does not have the military might to destroy Israel or threaten its existence. This does not mean, though, that what we see today in the war will not be what we see tomorrow. There are others who want to get into the fight. Hezbollah, backed by Iran, has been making moves to enter the war, though they have not yet. Hamas was actually counting on Hezbollah to enter the war. They're actually surprised at how this war is turning out. They expected Hamas to join. They actually expected other countries to join. They expected Iran to join. And when all that didn't happen, they're kind of wondering where their allies have gone. But what's happening today may not be what happens tomorrow. And this is why I decided to do this digest on this article, because fortunes can change. Hezbollah, although they have not got into the war, they have been doing more and more. They're taking little baby steps. I don't know why they are holding back. Some believe that Iran was warned by the United States that if Hezbollah joins the war, that the United States would attack Iran. I'm not exactly sure I believe that, because the United States has been pretty weak when it comes to confronting enemies directly. It's certainly possible that the United States made some sort of threat. They could. I did hear once somewhere that the United States made a secret threat to Iran that the United States would attack its economic targets, such as ports or its energy sector or things like that. And Iran is very dependent on its oil. They do have other exports like almonds. I was kind of surprised to know that. I think it's almonds. It starts with an A. That's a very popular export that they have. But oil is their big thing, and the United States is supposedly have threatened that, and so that's why Iran is holding Hezbollah back so much. That's just something that I've heard. I don't know if it's true or not. But Iran for itself has a formidable force that could be used against Israel. If Iran were to actually enter the war with Hezbollah, that could certainly change the calculus. And like I said, what's going on today may not be what happens tomorrow. What if others either see an opportunity to finally be rid of Israel or are prompted by their population to attack? Certainly public sentiment in the Middle East is against Israel. One merely has to look at the celebrations that took place in both Gaza as well as across the Middle East when Israel was attacked. Saudi Arabia is under enormous pressure from its population to back away from Israel. Saudi Arabia was actually making moves to normalize relations with Israel. Not normalize, but at least better than they were. And its population was very much against it. And there's other Middle Eastern countries. So the governments in the Middle East are having a hard time holding their population back. And how much longer are they going to be able to? We saw in the United States all these anti-Semites protesting against Israel. And all these protests, it's going on in Europe, it went on in Germany, it went on, and Germany didn't tolerate that. It went on in England, it's in France. It's just, it's shocking how many anti-Semites there are in the world. It's just disgusting. While Hamas itself cannot destroy Israel, a coalition certainly has the chance. And it could lead Israel to take strong steps to repel such a force. Now, does this mean that this will happen? Like I said, it doesn't look like it. Iran, as I said, is hated by the Middle East. Most countries seem reluctant to join the fight. And Lebanon doesn't want Hezbollah involved, fearing its territory would come under attack. In fact, it has come under attack. Hamas, at least at this time, seems to be on its own. But what about Hamas? Since civilian casualties mean nothing to them, Israeli or their own, what about that? Nuclear weapons, as I've stated, come in many forms. Most people know about the city-killing missiles, but there are smaller ones, tactical bombs designed to destroy small areas, or dirty bombs, which are intended not to kill large populations, but inflict psychological damage. Hamas likely has no access to nuclear missiles or large bombs, but small bombs, a dirty bomb, we have to acknowledge, and this is the point of the article, and this is the reason why I decided to do this digest. We have to acknowledge that such is within the realm of possibility. What would Israel do if a dirty bomb went off in the middle of Tel Aviv? Better question, what would the world do if a dirty bomb went off in the middle of Tel Aviv? Or the possibility of a dirty bomb in their own Western countries. Would the United States be more reluctant to assist Israel if the thought that it could lead to New York becoming under threat? And please leave your politics out of this. I'm very tempted to make a comment, but I'm not going to. Does Hamas or a supporter have access to the nuclear material to make a nuclear weapon? Let's say that Hamas has decided not to use a nuclear weapon in Israel. Who's to say that Habib or Joe Bob or Thunk decides on his own to support Hamas and bring in a dirty bomb into Israel? That, we have to acknowledge, is possible. Now, people would say it's difficult to get a hold of the uranium. You need to have, a skill set in order to make the thing. We're not talking perfect bombs. We're talking about a bomb that will do the job. And the nuclear material to make these type of dirty bombs, or even a small yield bomb, is out there. Are you telling me that North Korea won't sell something, or Iran won't sell something to Jim Bob? Goes up to Iran and say, hey, give me a couple kilograms of the stuff and I'll go do it myself. Are you saying that Iran won't do that? Their hands would be clean? Jim Bob, lone wolf out there, and I don't like putting wolves in bad light because they're my spirit animal, but who's to say that that isn't possible? All I'm trying to do is to get you to acknowledge the possibility. The truth is, we don't know. Some can argue that the mere fact that this has not happened yet, is evidence that Hamas is not going to do this, and that some lone wolf isn't going to be able to. That's a good argument, but it doesn't change that what is true today may not be so tomorrow. Iran, North Korea, and even Russia are sources of nuclear material which can be had for the right price. I just said that. For Iran, it may not take much to convince them to supply what is necessary for a dirty bomb. We have to understand that we're dealing with two sides that have motivation to use nuclear weapons. Israel, who will do anything it needs in order to survive, and an enemy whose morality does not prevent them from using nuclear weapons to achieve their goals. Again, notwithstanding any claim made by Iran to the contrary. Will nuclear weapons be used in the Hamas-Israel war? Probably not. Could they? Only a fool would believe it is impossible. Impossible. I want you to take that word out of your vocabulary. It is not impossible. Unlikely, but not impossible. So that is what I want you to accept and understand and acknowledge. And if it isn't impossible, please, for you people in the Middle East, for you people in Israel, for you people in high-value targets, New York, Los Angeles, London, Paris, it's not going to kill you to prepare. It could kill you if you don't. Just have some supplies on hand. If it's just a small bomb, which is likely, we're not talking weeks and weeks and weeks of shelter. We really are talking just a few days, 2 weeks at the most. Have food, have water, have medical supplies. Be able to be on your own for 2 weeks or so until the area can be decontaminated, so the radiation level can go down, so the government can come in and help you. Just, if you have supplies and you don't need them, great. If you need supplies and you don't have them, whose fault is that? Just acknowledge the possibility that it could happen. If it doesn't happen this time, it's going to happen sometime. So please just be ready. That is the main point I wanted to make out of that article and of this digest. Just be prepared. It's a bad area. This war will eventually end and another one is going to happen. And who knows, it may be smaller, it may be bigger, it may involve other countries. I certainly believe there's going to be a major war in the area. So just prepare yourself. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you for spending the time with me. I hope I've given you something to think of. Please continue to visit our site, visit us on the community forum. If you support what we do, we have some links in the comment section where you can support us. Do remember that our servers and all this costs us money, even if you have $1 to spare for us. Thank you for that. It does help us keep the system running. I'm Tom Lonely Wolf, Director of the DEFCON Warning System.